We're here to explore diverse career paths through personal experiences and real-life examples.
And also to offer profound insights to inspire your professional journey.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Work Without Borders. I'm Flora.
Hi, everyone. This is Calvin.
So today, we're going to talk about something that very related to my background, which is marketing. I am so honored to invite my friend, Simon Chou, who is a natural marketer in my mind, to join our talk today. Hi, Simon. Welcome.
Hello, hello. Thanks for calling me a natural marketer. I wouldn't consider myself a natural marketer, but yeah, excited. Thanks for having me and excited for this conversation.
Yeah, today we're going to really just to find out the secret sauce of marketing. I want to give you guys a little bit background of Simon here. So the reason I call him a natural marketer is that I feel like he is living marketing himself. He's not just a CMO or he's not just like a marketing professional, but he owns like two podcasts, and then he also hosts tech happy hours, like just self-started, and then to form the community, make an impact. So that's why I call him a natural marketer. So Simon, why don't you tell us how would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think what makes I think recently I've been really into events, and the big thing about events, at least that's like what I think, is events has to be about the people and about the people in the room. So I actually don't really like to introduce myself very, very often, which might come as a surprise. But even when you listen to my podcast, I don't really talk about myself a lot. I like to listen to other people's stories, and I think that's what makes. Um, I think that was one of the secret sauce for me as a marketer is just always thinking about the other people and thinking about the other person on the other side. If I were to introduce myself on your guys' podcast, I would say, just a kind of, I wouldn't say a natural born marketer. I had to learn marketing from scratch. Currently, I'm doing a handful of different things. I joined BC Jobs in 2020 as the CMO, like you mentioned. And just last year, early last year, I became the CEO. So took on the CEO position. Started a couple of podcasts. The first podcast I started was in 2020, and the second podcast I started was in 2022. Um, yeah, what else? I've been hosting a lot of IRL events, so in-person
Mhm,
events.
mhm.
Just hosting different happy hours for the tech community in Vancouver and also the founder community in Vancouver. And aside from that, I love talking about podcasting. I love talking about personal branding. And yeah, I'm excited to just I love having conversations like this. I think podcast is the number one medium, at least for me, to have conversations with whoever you want to, right? For you guys, I don't know exactly the demographic that you like to bring on, but I understand that a lot of your listeners are working professionals, so they want to listen to other
Mm.
people that can provide tips. For me on my podcast, I like to bring C-suites and founders because that's my demographic. And the cool thing about podcasts is you can bring whoever you want on your show. So yeah, super excited for this.
That's
Nice.
awesome. This is the first podcaster we bring to our program, right, Calvin?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, the
Absolutely.
first professional. So yeah, it's I don't know if it's
Excited.
we call this collab or like we're interviewing, but yeah, like this is fun. Good. So yeah, so like some of that you mentioned that you actually started marketing from scratch, right? And then like right now you also are the CEO, I mean like CMO and CEO of this company. So like how did you break into marketing in the first place? Like what interests you?
Oh my God. I don't know if you guys want to get into the full detail. I'm happy to dive into it, but I it was a very, very tough journey getting into marketing for me, because I graduated with a finance degree.
Oh.
Well, imagine spending 4 or 5 years thinking that you're going to go down one path. I really
Mm-mm.
wanted to be an investment banker. So I did my whole finance degree. That was like 4 or 5 years. I did internships, co-ops, and all that stuff, thinking I was going to get into banking. Ended up getting a job in banking and then realized I hated it. So imagine spending 6 years invested into this one area, and then suddenly you do a 360. And I was like, I kind of want to join a startup because at that time it was 2015 when I decided I wanted to pivot. 2015, 2016, Facebook had IPO'd, Snapchat was growing, the tech scene was just booming. Everyone's just talking about tech, 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 right? Um, and I'm like, well, why am I in banking creating pitch decks? And especially in Vancouver, I was investing in oil and gas and mining, and not a jab in this industry, but I just felt like I really wanted to be in a more innovative industry that was creating things for the future. And so I'm like, I want to join a startup. I applied to like 1,000, 2,000 jobs. Like had to be around 2,000. I got like 2 interviews because everyone,
Literally.
literally 2. And people were, because the main question was like, why do you want to get into marketing? And what experience do you have in marketing? Well, I had no experience.
Exactly.
And as much as I wanted it, you got to look at the other side. They didn't want me. So I just wasn't employable from a marketing perspective. So I did what everyone would do at the time, and I decided to start my first startup. So 2016 was my first startup. Um, did that for 3 years,
Hmm.
exited in 2019,
Hmm.
and then 2020 I was trying to figure out what to do.
Hmm.
Came back to Vancouver. Didn't really know anyone in Vancouver, but very fortunate at the time. BC Jobs was getting acquired, and I joined in a package deal to join them as a CMO.
Hmm.
Fast forward 4 years, now I'm the CEO and running a lot of events. So it's just kind of crazy, not just in marketing, but in your career, how things can just change so quickly.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I want to go back to your moment of realization, I would call it. Like after you spend 6 years in one thing and then you realized it's not what you want. Would you say that connects deeply to your value or like your like personality, who you are? Because that does sound like a drastic change, right? So like how do you read into this moment of realization?
I think, and I can't speak for everyone, but at least me personally, I don't, I've always been, um, aware of what I loved doing and what I didn't like doing. And at that time, I don't know where it came from, to be honest. I think maybe because
Hmm.
I played a lot of sports growing up, and I always was aware which sport I loved more, and I spent more time in that sport. But when it came to your career, you kind of only have one path, like finance. So I had to decide whether I loved finance or not. And at the time, I just didn't love it. Um, and and I decided to go in marketing. Now, was it possible that I also would have not loved marketing and then suddenly moved? Yes, totally possible. But at that time, I just did not really felt like I loved investment banking and
Yeah.
finance. And so I had to make a decision. I kind of dug deep within myself, and I was always very creative. I did a lot of art growing up. I did kind of uh, like on stage theater, acting and singing. Like I did a lot of that stuff growing up.
Hmm.
Um, I always was very like always thought of myself as a pretty creative person, and I'm just asking myself like, why did I get into banking? And I think the big reason was the money. Like I was drawn to the money in banking. But then, you know, I don't know. I just felt like I needed to make a change. I don't know if there was a moment in time. It was just like many, many moments,
Right.
with myself and asking myself, do I love it? And I think people that are listening that are in a certain career or in a business or whatever, just constantly asking yourself, do you love what you're doing right now is so important because man, we spend like 60, 70% of our waking hours working. So if you don't love what you're doing, that's a pretty shitty thing that you're spending that much time like doing something that you don't love, right?
That's very true. Yeah. And also
Yeah.
sending 2,000 plus resumes when you first break into the industry, that's just a dedication, right? That's crazy. And then is it why that you decided to start your own company instead of like pursuing working for somebody else? Because that you feel you're only hearing two out of 2,000. Is that the like main reason?
Oh yeah, super like
Frustrating.
frustrating, kills your confidence. And then I think I just decided, why am I spending so much time applying to a job where I'm not in control of it? After I send my resume, now it's out of my control. It is now fully in the control of the recruiter. And I just decided, if I start my own startup, at least I can control whether it fails or not. No one can tell me that I'm not ready, or sorry, you don't have the experience.
Mm.
And I think we're in a place right now, and I'm happy to talk more about jobs and stuff if that's where you guys want to go. Like, I'm happy to talk about whatever you guys want to talk about, but we're in a place right now where a lot of jobs are getting displaced, a lot of layoffs,
Yes.
a lot of hiring freezes. And I talk to a lot of people, obviously in my role as CEO of BC Jobs. I talk to a lot of people, a lot of talented people that got laid off and just have had similar rejections as I am. Like, I talked to this one person recently, ex EA, um, ex Yelp, senior, very senior,
Mm, mm,
so much experience, but been
mm,
jobless for 8 months now. And this is just one case of tens of hundreds of thousands of people out there. I think right now, if you are applying for like kind of like me, you've applied to 2,000, 3,000 jobs and you're not getting a lot of answers, most likely it's just a very, very tough market right now. And you can either keep applying to another 3,000 and get one or two interviews, or you can take matters in your own hand and start something, which is what I did. And
mhm.
it led to so much afterwards. So
Yeah, Simon, I really love that you mentioned that we should keep asking ourselves questions, and then is this something we love? Um, but I want to challenge you a little bit right here, right now, because you yourself know not everybody is a CEO type, not everybody is a startup type, not everybody can start up their own business after being rejected by a lot of jobs. Like based on your experience, based on how many people you've seen, like what would you suggest people in this situation to do? Like, yes, the market is shitty, and then they are probably being mismatched. But again, if they just can't, like if they're just not that type of startup people, what would you say?
I mean, you don't have to start a startup like me. And like, my first startup was selling, it was an e-commerce store selling tailored made suits for females, which I felt at the time was there was a huge need in 2015, because there were a lot of females getting into the workplace, but not a lot of companies selling suits to them. So that
Hmm.
I just felt like there was something. And at that time, to be honest, I was exactly the person that you were thinking, that you're talking about. I didn't know if I
Hmm.
was going to be a good founder. I didn't know if I was going to be successful. And I think a lot of people that have never started a business and don't have, rich uncles and successful family members that can guide them towards entrepreneurship. Most people will decide, hey, I'm not an entrepreneurship because that's not what my family did. That's not what I did.
Hmm.
I was exactly in that position.
Hmm.
I could have also talked myself out of it, but for something in me thought that I needed to start it. So I guess your question is like, what if the person is really not feeling like they are an entrepreneur? But that's okay. You don't have to go down that path, but maybe start something else. Um, I'll give an example. If you want to get into marketing, maybe start a newsletter, start a blog. Th-
I
That
love that.
that will teach you marketing skills
Love it.
that you can add to your resume for your next application. Or let's say you're a complete opposite. Let's say you're more of a technical, like software engineer, developer. Well, you can start an app. You
Like,
don't have,
yeah,
you
like
know,
Leah. Yeah.
exactly. You don't have to market it because that's not your skill set, but you can build something gorgeous and with so many specs and features that now, hey, look, now you can show off this project as something that you built on the side. It will add to your resume. Just do things that will add to your resume. Like you don't have to start a full-on startup.
I love it. I love it. I think what Simon is saying right here is to gain as much as agency to really initiate what you really want to do. And then you can, it can be as small as a newsletter or an app, but definitely will guide you to somewhere you want to be. That's brilliant. I love it.
Yeah. And then what I'm hearing is that also putting your passion, right, into something small, right? Start something, and then maybe a side gig, even that you cannot find a job right away. Maybe start something small and showcase your abilities, and build up from there, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Like I think the first thing I ever started was exactly that. I started a blog 2014. I was working in a bank and I saw so many mining companies and oil and gas and all that stuff. So I started a blog just sharing my thoughts on what I thought about each investment. But then I started getting bored of it. So I started writing, I found myself writing more and more about tech stocks. I was writing about should you invest in Facebook? Should you invest in, I talked about the Snapchat thing. I talked about Yahoo at that time. I think Melissa forgot her name now. She was the old CEO, the female, and she got pregnant and then she came back. So I talked about how amazing it was that a CEO got pregnant and came back to work after 6 weeks. I found myself kept talking about tech over and over again on my blog, and that guided me. Sometimes starting a blog can guide you in your own personal thoughts. If you find yourself talking a lot about an area, chances are you're probably passionate about it. But if you never have a chance to let your brain have an outlet so that you can kind of read and understand your brain a little bit more, maybe you'll never understand. It'll be hard for you to understand where you really are passionate about. And that's why when you go into job interviews, a lot of times, like the recruiters or when you get to the final stages, they want to ask you, like, what are you passionate about? Like, what are you excited about? What are your hobbies? They want to know that you understand yourself, right? And at that time, I didn't really fully understand myself too well, but I did understand what I didn't like, what I was kind of curious about.
Yeah,
Nice.
that resonates a lot because I think doing reflection is one of the most important thing of self-development. If you really want to be who you want to be, you need to do as much reflection as possible and then understand yourself. So Simon, let's talk about your podcast because I think we first met on a social event and a tech social event, and then I got to know about your podcast that you're taking hot sauce shot with your guests, regardless if they're CEOs or big heads from big companies. But you guys are having like hot sauce shot, like drinking it. I just want to talk about it more. Like, how did you come up with the idea, and then how is your journey like?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the journey a little bit. I started my podcast 2020. Well, this particular podcast was started in 2022, I want to say. It was 2022. Yeah, it was a very first episode was August 2022 was the very first episode. So it's been about I want to say 15 months-ish, right? The first 1 or 2 months, it was just a regular marketing podcast. Like I got founders. First of all, I knew who I wanted to bring on the show.
Okay.
CEOs, CMOs, and founders. I knew that already because I want to connect with other people and have conversations with like-minded people. At the time, I was a CMO transitioning to a CEO, so I wanted to speak with more CEO/CMOs. And I also was a past founder, so I want to talk to founders too. So I knew who I wanted to come on the show. Now, with the hot sauce and everything, that actually didn't happen the first 2 months. The first 2 months, we recorded probably 9 episodes. We wanted to go pretty fast, so we recorded 9 or 10 episodes really quickly, and we barely got any views, like almost no views. Like I'm talking about each episode had 10 views on YouTube, 20 views on Instagram, maybe 5 listens on Spotify. Between me and probably my girlfriend and my cousin or whatever, right? It was basically no views. And at the time, I'm like, man, We're one of 100,000 marketing podcasts out there. Probably that's the reason why no one listens to our stuff. And when I ask myself the question as a CEO, CMO, am I listening to a lot of podcasts? And the answer is not really. And probably I need to target the younger audience, the younger listeners, and maybe the junior to intermediate marketers. And I knew I needed to do something to stand out. Like if I'm just gonna talk about marketing tips and tricks, there's 100,000 other people talking about it. Why should they listen to Simon's podcast? And I'm like, okay, you know what? Let's. I did a little bit of brainstorming. My favorite show that I watch is Hot Ones by Sean Evans, and I watch it all the time religiously because it's entertaining. It's a show where they bring celebrities on the show and they eat very spicy chicken wings, and then they start sweating and they and it's entertainment, but you learn a lot. So I'm like, okay, cool, let's try it. We reached out to like 40 C-suites, and like I think we got three responses. One of them said, "There's no way we're gonna do hot sauce," and then and the other two was like, "Sure, can I learn more about it? Like, can I see some episodes?" Same problem, right? Like, I don't have examples, so
Experience.
I can't tell you whether it's gonna happen or not. But from the answers that we got, it seemed like no one was interested. But we kept pushing. We finally got one local company, Mark Wandler, local CEO, local
I know
founder.
him.
Yeah,
We're alumni. Yeah.
he came on the show and he gave it a shot. Literally gave it a shot. We took shots of hot sauce on the show. That one episode went to 10,000 views. From 10 views to 10,000, not 10,000, 1,000 views. So not like not crazy, but it's still 100x improvement from where we were.
Yeah.
So okay, I think this is cool. I'm happy with these kind of numbers. Let's keep going. We kept recording more and more and more, and it kept growing from 1,000 to 1,500 to 2,000 views and 2,500. Because all of like if you're a founder, think about it, if you're a founder of C-suite, all of your employees want to see you die with hot sauce. It's hilarious. It's hilarious.
It is.
But it draws you in with the hot sauce. But then the content of the show is so valuable that, okay, I'm going to listen to the content now. The hot sauce draws you in, but the content makes you stay. We kept doing it. And then we got Microsoft on the show. As soon as Microsoft came on the show, like everything kind of opened up because we got a big brand name. The CMO of Alo Yoga came on the show. CMO of Jenny Craig came on the show. CMO of SEMrush. CMO of Stack Overflow. CMO of meetup.com. You guys might know meetup.com. She came on the show. And it just kept going. We kept getting big names. CMO of Slack came on the show. It just kept going over the next 12 months. And it's just been like first of all, very humbling and incredible journey personally. And I've had so many incredible conversations with C-suites that I never thought I would ever meet, by the way, as a small, company, a CEO of a small company in Canada. BC Jobs, not a really large company. I don't really know a lot of people. So, but because through podcasting, I was able to meet people all around North America and around the world that I would have never have met. So yeah, it's been a really cool.
Nice.
That's a great journey.
What I'm hearing is that the hot sauce is the secret sauce, right, Simon? Should we start taking like a hot sauce right now?
Hot sauce is definitely a secret sauce.
That's awesome. Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. That sounds fun, right? Like I actually think the idea of it is just, can draw people in and then afterwards they can focus on the content. Yeah, I think that was very brilliant, very brilliant. But how did you think of having podcast as your like a platform to have more impact on people? Like how did you start your podcast in the first place? Why podcast?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll do something different. Maybe I'll throw it back to you guys first. Like, why did you guys start your podcast?
I love it. Calvin, do you want to take this one?
Sure, sure. Yeah, I'll take this one. I think it was honestly, I was a guest to one of my friend podcasts. And they wanted to talk about my career transition and then a bit of, giving advices, to audiences. And then afterwards, it's like, you know what, this is actually kind of fun. Like I love, sharing the idea and then, giving the impact. And then I also know Flora for the longest time. And then I think offline, Flora and I, we always have like very in-depth and brilliant conversations. So I just called her right away. I was like, hey, do you want to do this together? And then she's like, let's do it. So it's literally like over a weekend, right? Like we had everything planned out. I feel like this is one of our passions, like now I
Mhm,
realize. So we're very
mhm.
efficient. We're so productive. Like over one weekend, we have all the plans out. We had, we did all the brandings, content creations, and then we just, and then we're here. Yeah.
6 months later,
6 months later, exactly. Now it's what, 8 months now.
8 months now. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say, it's just passion. And then, yeah, we wanted to share our ideas and yeah, see what impact we can bring on people's life.
I mean, for me, I do have the impulse to share. Yes, I published 2 books, and then I have my blog, mm, really slowly updating, but still, I write regularly, and I think for a while I was trying to hold back a little bit of sharing my thoughts and ideas because I don't want to be preachy or I don't want to be imposing my ideas to other people. But while I was writing my second book, again, mainly about my experience, I felt like sometimes by sharing your experience, not telling people that you're very unique or special, it's telling people, hey, you're not the only one. So that gives people a lot of support from a stranger to make them feel like better because what they've experienced, good or bad, are kind of like shared. So it feels more connected. And then yeah, when Calvin called me, I was like, yeah, this is a great idea. And then I have to say um I am very good at keeping my commitment to other people. But if I'm doing it by myself, I would probably like won't keep it going. But if I have someone to hold me accountable and I'm holding someone else accountable, I think this will be more successful. So yeah, and then turned out I was right. We had agreed that we're going to publish an episode every week, and then here we are. We do it every week. But if it were just me, then probably I would just slack. So yeah, that's how we started.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is educate in Flora's in when it comes to Flora, and then for Calvin, it's like conversations, and that's I think these are the two main reasons. I mean, obviously, there's also the brand awareness, and some people might want to go famous and viral. But to
Mm,
be honest, that's literally 0.001% of podcasters will actually build a brand that is strong enough that will go viral. So I don't think that is a good reason for people listening that are curious. I don't think you should start a podcast for that reason. Starting a podcast for educational purposes is great. I found that that was not as strong of a draw for me. I originally started off because I wanted to educate,
mhm,
right? Like you, Flora. Like my first podcast was to educate. I wanted to educate people. That was my first podcast with BC Jobs, and that grew to about 500,000 views. We
mhm,
had a lot of views, but over time, the viewership kept falling because um, if you're just there to educate, you're gonna find that there's a lot of other people that are coming into the space to educate, and
right.
so much content out there.
That's right.
So much content for education. Why should they listen to you, to us? I find that education piece is tough because it's so competitive.
Mm,
But when I started my second podcast, it was really for one purpose, one reason only, which was to connect with other people. That's it. I knew I wanted to talk to more CEOs and CMOs and founders. I just wanted to have more conversations like that. That was it.
yeah.
Whether it grew big and became popular. We're very fortunate. We just broke 1 million views on our podcast, but that didn't matter for us. It was the conversations. Like, when do I ever get to sit down and have a 2 hour long conversation with the CMO of Slack? Just would never happen. But through a podcast, through a channel, it happened. So for me, it's really all about the connections. Like,
Yeah.
I
that's
love it.
yeah.
That's exactly how I feel too, right? The conversation, it's like sitting here right now, listening to your story, Simon. I think we're also benefited a lot, right? Just learning a lot of your story. So yeah, I think this is very valuable. Also, this platform can enable us to, talk to more people, right? Like, which is
Yeah.
out of our own, I don't know, like our industry or our friend circle. So yeah, this has been great. So I think that you mentioned you have two podcasts, right, Simon? So if you would like to maybe give us a bit of introduction about this two podcasts, and then because yeah, I think that would be great. Like, uh, what are the two podcasts?
Yeah, the first podcast is called Innovators by BC Jobs. This one is strictly branded for BC Jobs, and
Hmm.
we actually had paused that after 80, I think 85 episodes ish. We actually put it on pause because the premise of that podcast was to educate job seekers
Hmm.
on how companies are hiring during COVID. So it was
Hmm.
very time constricted. Once COVID ended, there really was no need for us to continue the podcast. Um, so we actually put that on pause as of 2022. And one of the main reasons why I wanted to start the second podcast, there were two. Number one, I wanted to connect with more C-suites and founders, but that came second. The first reason why I wanted to start the podcast was I didn't want to put all the equipment that I bought to waste. Like, I spent so much money on the camera and the mic over here and like all these different. I learned the whole process. Like, oh, it was such a waste if I just were to stop podcasting all in all. What? Let's try to come up with. And then I started, like, I spent a weekend trying to come up with a name for the second podcast.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, second podcast called Marketing on Mars.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, I think the idea there was to bring on C-suites to ask them tough questions, kind of like put them on a hot seat. So I
Yep.
was thinking, what kind of name would be hot? Okay, I wanted to keep marketing on there because I wanted to keep the marketing word in there. But then I don't know what this is called when you have two words that have the same letter. Totally forgot what that's called. Someone's probably going to comment. But I thought, okay, Mars is hot. Marketing on Mars.
Hmm.
It just kind of came up when I was like showering one day. I was like, oh, yeah, I shared it with a few friends. Oh, it sounds good. And literally the next day, I just put something together. Didn't really think too much about the name. Didn't even know I was going to do hot sauce shots. That came way after.
Hmm.
So it just goes to show the name doesn't really matter, and
Hmm.
things will change, but getting started is the most difficult step. That first step of starting is the hardest step. Everything else can change after,
Yep.
but nothing can ever force you to start. Only you can start. And once you start, everything can will take shape afterwards.
Brilliant. I love it. That's cool. And then you started to host events, happy hours for founders and then recruiters and so on and so forth. We want to delve in a little bit more on that aspects of your passion or your goal. Like, why did you start to do that?
Yeah, totally. So as a previous founder, I found that the hardest thing for founders is just having a community of other founders that they can just talk about challenges with. I found that for me, I spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley and in China and in Korea when I was starting my first startup. So I was not in Vancouver.
Hmm.
Um, and as I was traveling around and building my first startup, um, I just felt really lonely because I never spent enough time in one city to build a community. But when I did go out, like when I was in Silicon Valley and I went out to networking events to meet other founders, I found that the best was just having conversations and talking about your struggles and your journey. And I really wanted that in Vancouver. Once COVID opened up in 2022, I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
let me see what other founders are doing. Like, I want to see what the scene in Vancouver is like. And whenever I went to an event in Vancouver, it was always like not really founders. It was like someone like students and business development people and salespeople.
Yeah.
All the founder events weren't actually founders. They weren't actually building anything. And so I was like, okay.
Mhm.
I went to like 2 or 3 events and I was very disappointed in the scene in Vancouver for founders. So my very first event was in like November 2022. So probably very close to when I started my podcast. Like two months after I started about the podcast, I started my very first event. And it was literally just me and 6 friends, 6 founder friends that I knew in the city that had startups, and we just grabbed beers at Earl's. And you guys know Earl's. Like we just
Mhm.
grabbed beers. It's just 6 of us, and then it was like so much fun because now we can just share our struggles about hiring, about marketing and scaling your marketing efforts, and talking about sales and building a sales team, and how do you think about
Raising fund.
raising funds,
Mhm.
firing people and moving, and how do you inspire people to be leaders, like things that as a founder you struggle with. It was so much fun. We're like, let's do it again. So the next time we met up was January or February 2023. And then I just said, hey, each person next time bring another founder. So everyone brought another founder. We quickly grew to 15 founders on the second event. And then it just kept growing from 30. Next one we did 40. And we kind of got
Mhm.
stuck in the 40 range until our seventh event. Amazon AWS was watching my LinkedIn a lot. By the way, I really highly recommend building in public. If you're building anything, just share it on public. You never know who's also having the same struggles or is thinking about what you're thinking about. I
Mhm.
started I started writing on LinkedIn around the same time. And
Yep.
now you guys see that where the LinkedIn is now. It was through a lot of I treated it almost like my personal blog. So
Yep.
I was writing about all the events that I was running. AWS was seeing the growth of the founder group. On the very seventh event, they wanted to partner up. So we partnered up with AWS and both Cap AI and Ripple Ventures. We
Mhm.
got about 70 founders. So, anyways, we kept doing it from 70 founders, and then we grew. Every single event that we ran, we usually get 60 to 70 founders. Mostly, I would say like 35% pre-seed, 40% are seed, and then the rest Series A plus. So every single founder in the room has raised minimum $100,000 to $10 million in fund. So they're all building something serious. And so when you're in a room like that, a lot of magic can happen. You can talk about challenges, potential partnerships, potential collaboration opportunities. There's just so much that can happen when founders are in the room. So long story short, we've hosted 9 events now, and we now have a community of about 350 founders in Vancouver. I try I then expanded to Toronto, and now we
Mhm.
have a community of 150 in Toronto. And then the next city that I'm looking to expand into is Seattle. So we're hosting a Seattle's founder event. Same thing for pre-seed to Series B founders.
Mhm.
Um, um, yeah, I think just having a community, very highly curated community where everyone's doing roughly the same thing, and being very intentional of not accepting founders that don't hit this rate, not because we're trying to discriminate against them or whatever. It's just
Mhm.
we like this is the stage that that this group is in. There are many of other so many other groups that help
Mhm.
connect founders at earlier stages. Those groups are great for you, but this group, like pre-seed to Series A, very, very specific. So yeah, that's kind of the journey of the event so far.
Well, I want to thank you for that because what Simon is doing right now is to putting on one of the secret sauces on the silver plat for everyone in listening to this episode, which is target audience. You really need to have a very clear set of your target audience to be successful in marketing, or else you don't know if you don't know who are you telling your story to, your story cannot be effective. So, yeah, thank you, Simon, for that. And then what about the recruiters?
Yeah, on the other side, I started like after running all these events for founders, I realized, hey, I'm also the CEO of BC Jobs. And we have, we have like almost 100,000 job candidates visit our site per year and over 1,200 job postings. So we're connected with probably around 4 or 5,000 recruiters in BC. Why don't we host events now to connect these two? And so I just took everything that I learned from the founder event, very specific target audience, like you mentioned, Flora, and then I just ran events. So I just ran an event 2 weeks ago, and Calvin, one of your friends, came out as well. We wanted to connect recruiters with job candidates.
Mm.
So I went to the recruiters first because I know recruiters hold the power. They're the ones who decide who to hire. So I was like, okay, recruiters, what are you hiring for right now in the tech world? Because I wanted to stay in the world of tech. They're like, we're only hiring senior tech talent. Okay, what do you mean? What's senior? Oh, we're looking for developers, engineers, programmers, UI, UX, but has to be 2+ years of experience. Easy. I got it. What if I filled the room with 90 people that fit this criteria? Would you want to come out and do speed networking? Yeah. Okay. They said yes. So the last event we had 90 senior tech talent, average 5 years of experience, 20% worked at FANG companies. And then we brought 15 recruiters. So they did speed networking. We played some on-stage games as well because I really believe in entertainment, as you guys have probably seen. And so we played some on-stage games, which I'm happy to share, like what we did. But yeah, this is our second event, and I'm planning to do 3 more later this year.
Wow.
That's cool. While you were starting, it's literally a bunch of friends or a bunch of friends to grabbing a beer. So did you have to do all the organizational logistics, or you just hey, let's meet at Earl's at 6 p.m. next Wednesday? Like, how much did you do in terms of event planning?
I think in the very first one was not much work, right? It's just 6 of my friends.
Yeah,
That was
exactly.
easy. The second one was also pretty easy because everyone just had to bring another friend, so that was easy. But where it started getting challenging, even the third and fourth was pretty easy because I didn't think about curation. It's so easy to bring 30 people in a room. I wouldn't say so easy, but it's relatively easy. The hardest part was curating, was telling myself I only want pre-seed to Series A. Now I need to spend time looking at people's profile and making sure that they're the right audience to come in the room. That is
Right.
what takes the most time. I really
Okay.
started thinking about curation after the fifth event. And yeah, that's the most challenging piece. So now like before I was running an event every other month almost, or every month. Now I'm running an event only once every 3 months because there's so much more effort required to curate.
Yeah, okay.
And by the way, that's why most events are not good. Like I would say, not just in Vancouver, but in any city, I would say 90% of events are not good because 90% of an event, they just want to fill the room. They want to make it look big. They want to sell tickets. That's it. Nobody really thinks about, it's very rare because it's so much effort. Like the most effort goes into curation.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because now you can't invite 80% of the room now. You can't invite 80% of your LinkedIn audience now. There's only a very small subset will fit the criteria that you want. And curation means that you hold this kind of rule above all else. Like you don't
Yeah.
think about money. You don't think about the size of the room. All you're thinking about is people in the room. That's a lot of effort. It's a lot of effort. I would say like 90% of my effort is in curation.
Yeah.
And then when like AWS partnering with you, are they sponsoring the venues, or how do you partner with people?
There's different types of sponsors for different
Right.
things, right? It depends what people want. Like
I see.
for example, I hosted a poker night 3 weeks ago with 30 founders, and um, there's a lot of rules behind that. You can't you can't gamble because it's illegal. So it had to be based on charity. So we brought a charity on board who can collect the money. And all the money went towards a charity, but the charity had to be founder focused. So finding a charity that is founder focused. And then also some companies don't want to be affiliated with poker or gambling at all. right?
Yeah.
Most companies, I would say. So then you got to find the right sponsors for the right events. Whereas happy hours are very easy. Everyone can sponsor happy hours. That's fine.
I
But
see.
so just understanding the sponsors and by the way, sponsorship dollars and revenue and all that stuff didn't come until like the seventh event when AWS came out and saw us, which means the first six events, everyone just paid for their own drinks and food,
Yeah.
which is how communities are supposed to be built. Like you're not
That's right.
supposed to,
Yeah.
don't think about, whoa, I got to do all these things. Just start small.
Yeah.
Literally six people in a room grabbing beers at Earl's. That's how we started. And that's how most things should start. Don't start too big.
Yeah.
Don't start with the end in mind. Start with just the beginning. What's your next step that you need to take? And
That's
go
right.
from there.
Manage your expectations, right? Yeah. Yeah. And then by hosting a lot of those happy hours and then even the recruiter events, how did you find it reflect on your own growth? Yeah, by having all those events.
Like personal growth or
Yeah, personal growth.
holy, yeah. I think I've basically had to become a different person. Um, Not in a bad way. I'll explain. I'll explain. Um, before I started doing podcasts, I think podcasting was where it began. I was very, very much introverted. I was an investment banking analyst. I did a lot of pitch decks, and then afterwards, I was a startup. I spent so much time just running ads and sending emails. Like I didn't talk to a lot of people for like the first 6 years of my career. So naturally, we're creatures of habit, right? When you don't talk a lot in your day to day, you naturally become more introverted. You have more energy. You have so much time by yourself. I was very introverted, but once I started running podcasts, I became a little more extroverted, but still not really because I'm just talking in a screen like this. Adding events where I'm hosting 30, 40, 70 people in a room, I really had to learn how to be fast at it with conversations. I learned how to remember names. I was always very bad with names. I had to learn how to remember names. I had to learn
Me
how to,
too.
yeah, start conversations on the spot like that and make and think about people in the room so much. Like there's a lot of skills that I had to learn. I basically had to become a new person to match the Simon that I wanted to be to run events well.
And
Nice.
speaking of which, is this what you have planned? Did you plan all of this? Or it's kind of like grow naturally, organically into something?
Yeah, it just grew naturally. Like when I first started, I just wanted to connect with more founders. And it started with just six founders in a room, and it just kind of grew naturally to 12 and then 20, 30. I didn't know, like the group didn't have a name until 3 months ago. I called it happy hour because like because I kept inviting people, hey, let's grab happy hour. That's how the name came out. Like, I just, hey, let's grab happy hour. So then the name now you see on my LinkedIn is the group is literally called Happy Hour.
Yep.
It just started really naturally, like organically. And I think that's how most things start. Like I always use dating as a metaphor. Like if getting a girlfriend or getting married is a final destination, and also if like building a very successful startup that raises money and everything is a final destination, you can't start with a final destination in mind. You can't you meet someone for the first date. You can't say, okay, here's the plan. We're gonna I think we're gonna get married in like 3, 4 years. That's my plan. And we're gonna do this. We're gonna have a first date in this date, and then our second date is gonna be this month. Like if you plan out everything, it's probably not gonna happen the way you want it. And in fact, it's gonna scare people off. It's
That's
probably
really
gonna scare,
true. That's very
right?
It's
true.
true. It's
Yeah.
true. It's true.
Versus you have a first date, you start off with some conversations, you get to understand the person. Like my first event with the founders, I just got to understand. We just talked about challenges, and then I asked people, "Do you want to do it again?" Everyone said they want to do it again. So we're good signs. Now we're gonna do a second event.
Mm.
So if the person that you went on a date with liked you and they want to go for the second date, and you got to confirm this, by the way, right? Otherwise, it's an awkward thing. So you confirm it. Now you do the second date. Now you go to a third date. After a year, you keep doing the right things. Life
Mm,
is life is just a accumulation of all the decisions that you make.
That's right.
So you keep doing it over and over again, and after a year, after 2 years, maybe you guys are engaged, and maybe now you guys are getting married, and then there's gonna be a baby or whatever. But it's just different. You just gotta keep going and let it grow organically. But
mm-hmm,
if you keep, some people obviously have the end in mind, but
mm-hmm.
you can't lead off that way.
You can force it, right?
You
Yeah,
can't force it.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. I love this metaphor that you use dating and then to, I think it's very easy for us all to understand. Yeah, that's great.
absolutely. You have your end goal in mind, but you don't start with the
Yes.
end goal. You start
Yes.
with doing the first thing right, the
Yeah.
second thing right, the third thing right, and then a series of right decisions, and then keep checking in, and then stay connected, and then eventually we'll get there. Or maybe you
Yeah.
won't. Who knows,
Maybe you
right?
won't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Maybe
exactly.
you won't. Yeah.
But it's a good mentality to have, right? Yeah. So Simon, what's your next big thing? Like what do you have planned next?
I think well, I'm gonna continue to do these tech events for Vancouver because I think Vancouver needs more. It's not a very friendly environment right now for job seekers. It's very,
Mm-hmm.
very tough to find a job. So I want to run more events to support the job ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
So I've started adding one thing to my repertoire. I'm starting
Mm-hmm.
adding office hours every Monday. So
Mm.
every Monday at from 2 to 4 p.m. I have open office hours, and any job seekers can come and talk to me and ask me questions. I go to the same coffee shop every single Monday.
Mm-hmm.
Last week we had 8 people, so let's see how many show up next week. But and then these hiring speed networking events, I'll continue to run those. Founder events, continue to run more, but adding poker more. Like we did one poker event. I think I'm gonna do more because poker is just so much fun. And then yeah, just keep adding like new kind of interesting events and continuing to create like good experiences for founders locally. So yeah.
That's awesome. Where's your happy hour cafe? I'm sorry, office hour cafe.
Is that JJ Beans in Olympic Village?
Mm,
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah.
cool.
Okay.
Yeah. So listeners in Vancouver, if you want to talk to Simon in office hour, it's Monday, JJB's in Olympic Village.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
brilliant. Simon, do you have any questions for us?
Um, yeah, what are your guys' goals this year?
That's great.
Flora, you
Oh
go
my
ahead.
God, love
We
it.
just chat
Okay.
about this.
We'll just chat about this. Yes. So our goals for the podcast is that I definitely want to keep the good content. Yes, I mean, education is difficult, but our aim is to sharing real life experiences and presenting a lot of insights, including yours today, like Simon, to help people feel connected and then to help people gain from other people, like other people's stories and experience. So my goal is to really keep the quality of the content, and definitely definitely reach out to more people, connect with more people via this platform. Like Calvin mentioned earlier, I reach out to people because of this podcast, and those people are some I would never think of reaching out if I weren't doing this podcast, and some were like reconnected after 10 years of working together because of this podcast. So yeah, keep getting energy from this podcast. Calvin?
That's right. Yeah, I think for me it's, I would just use Simon's like metaphor of dating, right? Like I think right now I have this mentality of just let it be organic, let it grow, and even we wanted to, obviously have impact on more people and then to reach out more people, but I feel like over the last 8 months, I've really enjoying have this conversation with different peoples and then meet up with Flora every week and then share our own thoughts. So yeah, I think like this has been great. So I'd like to keep it going. And then let's see where 2024 takes us.
Sweet. Well, this was a great conversation, guys. Good job with your podcast, and thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks,
Absolutely.
Simon. Yeah.
Thank you for coming, Simon. Really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Bye for
Thank you.
now.
Bye
Thanks.
bye. Thanks,
Bye.
Simon. All right, I guess that's it for today. Thank you for tuning in. Or our audience can continue finding us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify by searching Work Without Borders. And we will see you again next Wednesday.